LGBTQ youth are more likely to experience bullying, sexual, dating violence, and homelessness, make more suicide attempts, and are more likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder than their cis-hetero peers. LGBTQ youth also experience discrimination in the healthcare system, causing some to avoid seeking medical care.
I mean, when we look at even just like the beginning of the education of physicians, we don't see any specific training on LGBT identified people, trans people in particular, but also LGBT folks as a general umbrella. So it's really the physician's job, when they aren't getting that training, to train themselves. It shouldn't be up to your patients to come in and answer those questions for you.
I think that's really common with a lot of medical providers, is that they're not given cultural competency training or training to deal with people that are not heterosexual cisgender.
Sometimes there is also angst within members of the LGBTQ community of their orientation around going to doctors in general. Sometimes it's not even about, oh, I want this procedure and insurance won't do it. Sometimes it's like, I'm going to the doctor for, it could be any number of things, and I don't know how that experience is going to be because I've had this negative experience in the past.
I mean, where to begin? I think there's less of an understanding of the way their bodies work. I think a lot of times because of the violence and discrimination they face, they're afraid to tell their doctors about what's going on, when in fact the doctor should be there as an advocate who listens and understands everything. I'm from the Milwaukee area, and Milwaukee, as most people know, is a highly segregated area. It's really challenging for a lot of communities in Milwaukee, particularly low-income communities, communities of color, queer and trans people that live in these areas, to get high-quality, inclusive health care.
State health excludes trans care, right? So even for identical drugs, hormones, or procedures, it's not covered if it's related to a gender transition. It is covered for other things like hormonal birth control. So there's an explicit exclusion on trans care.
The challenges that people face definitely depend on their identity, right? So I think in particular intersecting identities.
So it's important to not just think about queer and trans identity when thinking about this issue, but to also consider race and ethnicity, ability, or what else, class.
I think that then the push to get people to get tested for STIs, we have to make it as comfortable as an environment as possible. So part of that looks like really making sure that our providers have an understanding of queer identities, right? Queer and trans identities.
Making sure that we have protections in place for all people, and also making sure that every medical professional has comprehensive, inclusive training. I think that's really, really important, and I think it's underrated.
I don't think there's one way that this is going to get solved. I honestly think it's see where you're at, see what resources you have, and then move from there.
Discrimination is a systemic issue that stems from a history of oppression and a lack of representation. The effects of a homophobic and a transphobic society influence the medical care LGBTQ youth receive. We need affirmative health care now.
When I was growing up in rural Delaware, Ohio, my doctor never once talked about sexual health, never once talked about, asked me if I was a part of the LGBT community. And I always, because of that, felt a little weird about asking him about that. But I just specifically remember when I came back from college, I told my doctor, I need to get HIV tests. I need to start getting STD tests. And he's was confused. Why do you need to start doing that? Why? Why do you need those tests? And I don't see any symptoms of any of this stuff. And I was like, well, I am a gay male, and I understand that these things are things that I need to start talking about, thinking about, looking at. It brought up all those different things that you think about when when you kind of tell a doctor you need something and they feel like they don't think that you need it as well. So feeling invisible and those kind of things.
In my later 20s, my partner and I decided we wanted to try to have a baby. And we tried to no avail. We went to a specialist hoping that we could just begin to understand our options, recognizing that options for two women trying to have babies insurance-wise are a little bit more constricted than they are for heterosexual couples. And he began talking with me and completely and totally just focusing on me. And my partner was sitting right next to me, and he acted like she wasn't even there. So I continued to refer to her and us and we and our family that we're trying to create together, and he just couldn't even look to acknowledge her presence, which was disturbing because we were together trying to do this together. And he got more and more agitated as I was asking questions. And at the height of it, just finally said, "You know what, I can't give you any special treatment." And that was when we said, "Thank you very much," and left. It made me and us feel invisible. Even though he was looking at me, it made me feel like he's not seeing me at all. He's not understanding what we're here to talk about.
There are many ways to practice affirmative healthcare. Adhering to affirmative healthcare practices can contribute to mental and emotional well-being, reducing risk factors we mentioned earlier from developing. There are several healthcare centers across the country that specialize in seeing queer patients. Here are just a few.